G'day folks, welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone update today for the general public, the 10th of April 2017. My name's Chris Nitzo. This update is sponsored by our major sponsor, Campbell Scientific Australia, when measurements matter. Folks, we've got two tropical lows in the Australian region, third one about to form also up in the Coral Sea. Now the idea here is that this one here is finished, ex-tropical cyclone Ernie. He had a very spectacular lifetime. Ernie made Category 5. It was a very short lifespan, but he did make Category 5 in the meantime and is now harmlessly weakening away about over 1,000 kilometres away from the WA coastline and will continue to move further away. Out in the Coral Sea, we saw Tropical Cyclone Cook make landfall here in the New Caledonian region, developed around Vanuatu, tracked in a southwest direction fairly rapidly, hit Vanuatu. It's not coming anywhere near Queensland. It'll continue moving in the south and then southeast direction over the next 24 to 48 hours. It may pose a threat to the North Island of New Zealand in a few days' time, as well as a decaying or as an extratropical transitioning cyclone. In the northern Coral Sea and the Solomon Sea, we've got a lot of cloud. Now, that cloud is expected to organise into something. That something is expected to be reasonably weak at this stage, but we do need to keep an eye on it. You can see the convection out there in the Solomon Sea is quite deep. However, it's not very organised. So at the moment, it needs to show some organisation over the next 24 hours for us to pay too much attention to it. The Bureau of Meteorology not overly concerned about that circulation in the Solomon Sea. Look, it will likely move to the west and it will likely hit the coast around far northern Queensland into the North Peninsula region. And look, there are certainly some signs that it will intensify into a reasonable tropical low here. And you can see at the in the southern or southwestern quadrant of the system, we're getting some fairly strong winds at the 850 hectopascal level, and even at the surface level, we're looking at 20 to 30 knot winds developing on that southwest side of the system. And that's purely and simply because of a pressure gradient squeeze between the low pressure system here and a building ridge in the southern parts of Australia. The combination of the ridge and the low create this fairly strong wind gradient here, or strong pressure gradient that creates the winds that you see here on the southwestern quadrant. Now, the expectation is as the ridge builds into the south of the system will then track west and hit the North Peninsula. At this stage, we're expecting the system to hit the coast north of Cooktown. Probably late in the week, or more likely during the weekend, it'll end up making landfall, and you can just see it there on the Access G computer model. A little bit further north on the European model, we can see that the system makes landfall just up around Bamaga to Lockhart River on Saturday or Friday into Saturday. Certainly does show some sign of intensifying on its approach though, and you can see this strong wind associated with that pressure gradient squeeze to its southwest. The GFS Model 2 has a low pressure system making landfall around Lockhart River, between Lockhart River and Princess Charlotte Bay. And once again, you can see that squeezing pattern occurring to the south of the system. In the GFS scenario, probably looking at an increase in shower activity up through Cairns, Cooktown area as well. So you're getting this convergent flow. Notice how the arrows here, the wind arrows, are just getting squeezed together. That usually creates a fair bit of rain, particularly on that section of coastline that does quite well in that flow, which is the Cassowary coastline and the North Tropical coastline. And that's exactly what the model's showing up there. Some reasonable rainfall developing around that area just north of Cairns, just around Cairns at this stage. A lot will depend on exactly where the system makes landfall as to which section of this coastline is going to receive some pretty decent rain. And at this stage, it looks as though it's going to be north of Cairns, but as I say, there is a little bit of variation. We'll keep you up to date anyway over the next couple of days. There'll be a nightly update for everyone for these or all of these systems, so to give you an idea of what the latest is. The only two computer models that significantly develop this system is the UK Met, which develops a very borderline Category 1 tropical cyclone on approach to the North Queensland coast, and also brings it a little closer to Cooktown. And that's something that we'll need to be mindful of as the system forms over the next couple of days, just to see whether or not it does have that potential to intensify. We'll be talking about the reasons why or why not that might happen, if that made any sense, with our subscribers in the morning. So to become an OCC subscriber, head to ozcyclonechasers.com.au/subscribe, and we'll have a chat about that in the morning. Otherwise, tomorrow night we'll have another brief update to see how everything's progressing. Of course, the talk is a tropical low that could become Tropical Cyclone Francis. Now you can see the system is generally been tracking in the south, and now latest in the last sort of few hours has started tracking in a more southwesterly direction. And Darwin is now on cyclone watch. We've all got a cyclone warning up here in the Coburg and the Tiwis. The expectation here is that the system will track west of the coastline, but there is still an error margin that pulls the error margin right on the coast. You can see getting up to about category 2 is the expectation. Let's take a look at the general computer model guidance on intensity. Most computer models here estimating that the system over the next 24 to 48 hours will max out in intensity and max out at around that 40 to 50 knot range. So borderline 1, 2 tropical cyclone, most likely a 1 in most of the guidance. Bearing in mind, of course, that computer models tend to do very poorly with developing tropical cyclones. Once they're reasonably well developed, they tend to do quite well. But when they're in their developing stages, computer models can do pretty poorly with intensity. But a couple of models are showing a rapid intensification of the system, but that's less than 20% chance at this stage. Overall ensemble track forecast suggesting a southwesterly motion, then perhaps a dip to the south. Now this is going to be very important. If it does this dip to the south, we could see direct impacts on Darwin. If it doesn't do this dip to the south, then the system will pass, well, not harmlessly away to the west, but at this stage at a much more comfortable distance away to the west than we would otherwise see with a southward motion. So you can see computer modelling very, very close to Darwin there on the UKMet. On the Japanese model, the JMA model, we can see the system nudging the western parts of the Tiwi, still a fair way away from Darwin. The Crazy CMC model, we can see the system getting very, very close to Darwin on the Crazy CMC. The GFS model has been nudging it a little bit closer with every run, but what saves the day for Darwin is this westerly shift in the next 12 to 18 hours. If we don't see that, well then we could be looking at a direct impact on the city itself here with a Category 1 or borderline low Category 1 type tropical cyclone. And then the system will track west-southwest away from the NT. On the NavGem model, you can see direct impact on Darwin, the system tracking south instead of west. Looking here at the latest European computer model here, and we can see the system is north of the Tiwis. Notice this little westerly jut. This is what saves the day, and computer models are split as to whether this is going to happen. So this is the crunch period here, folks, between tonight and around about 10 o'clock tomorrow. If we don't see this westerly shift in track and the system continues tracking southward, so notice here how it's moving in this direction, and then suddenly between overnight tonight it shifts quickly towards the west. Now if it doesn't do that, Darwin comes straight into the firing line of the system. If it does do that, well then the system passes at arm's length well away from the city. And so you can see here on the European model we see that shift to the west, and it sort of nudges the western or northwestern edge of the Tiwi Islands. It's not moving in any particular hurry though, so it's going to create a fair amount of rain, in fact a lot of rain for the Tiwi Islands, and then because it's moving so slowly it's likely to create a fair amount of rain here for the entire northern coast. Let's take a look quickly at rainfall estimates. Well, we're expecting to see some heavy rain overnight tonight throughout the entire top end coastal region and adjacent inland areas, and then into tomorrow morning. If the system does shift to the west and remain fairly slow moving, this area here on the north coast around Maningrida and further west towards Warrawai, they're probably going to be in this beautiful little convergence zone. That's going to create some very heavy rainfall over a 3-hour period. You can see the modelling predicting up to 75 millimetres over 3 hours in that region. So expecting to see some fairly significant rain accumulation across this area. So even though the cyclone could be hundreds of kilometres away, the actual strongest convergence is probably happening here along that north coast. So we're expecting to see some very heavy falls here. We're also expecting to see a funneling effect happening in the Van Diemen's Gulf, and that's going to create a big increase in rainfall in and around that region too. So we'll see some very heavy falls here. Now at this stage, Darwin itself probably not receiving too much of that. You'll still see some showers and storms and possibly heavy at times, but probably not the heaviest out of this system at this stage. If everything goes to plan, the heaviest rainfall will occur well away from the centre, out here on the north coast, and also around the Tiwi Islands. Now, on the north edge of this system, there's some very dry air that's coming into the northern periphery of the tropical cyclone. That's going to limit its potential intensity at this stage, according to most computer models. And so the idea here is that most of the rain will fall south of the track, which is unusual for a tropical cyclone in and around the Northern Territory. Normally they're associated with a very strong monsoonal surge, and therefore a lot of moisture. In this situation, it's an atypical situation for a tropical cyclone to see most of its rainfall on the southern side of the system because of dry air, what we call dry air entrainment into the center of circulation. And that dry air entrainment, if it happens the way it's supposed to happen, should limit the potential intensity of the system to a very low-end tropical cyclone. Now that very low-end tropical cyclone can still pack a punch. You can see here wind gusts up to about 90 k's an hour by Wednesday night. Now, interestingly, the wind will see a bit of a funneling effect through the Van Diemen Gulf again, so expecting to see wind gusts up to about 80 to 90 kilometres an hour there. And in fact, I think McClure Island is already reporting up here around that 100 kilometre an hour or 80 to 100 kilometre an hour wind gusts. So there's no surprise there that we'll see those sort of wind gusts. And certainly, as the system comes onto or close to the Tiwi Islands, there'll be this real acceleration of air coming in from the south. And so you can see here that wind gusts getting right up into that 100 kilometre an hour range on the south side of that system, and then possibly getting a bit stronger than that up to about 115, 120 kilometres an hour on that southwestern edge of the system. Now you can see once again, because the winds are coming off the land here, Darwin is being spared the worst of it. You'll still see some gale force wind gusts, or still possibly see some gale force wind gusts. The strongest winds for Darwin might actually happen once the system has hit the Tiwi Islands and is now either on the southern edge of those islands or in this section here as close to the coast as possible. And that's when you'll start to get these northeasterly winds, and they'll probably pack more of a punch than the southeasterly winds. You can see as the system continues tracking just to your west, still packs fair punch here to the west. Just a bit of it's like having a really windy squall line, really, this sort of level intensity of a system as it goes through Darwin. Now, as I say, we can't rule rapid intensification out, but it's less than a 20% chance. Whereas with Tropical Cyclone Ernie, there was about 30% of models that were tipping a rapid intensification of him. 70% weren't. In this situation, we've got less than 20% that are tipping rapid intensification potential. Probability of seeing more than 200 millimetres of rain over the next 5 days certainly exists if you're in that north coastal region, possibly up around the Coburg. But once you go into the Darwin city itself, you've got about a 30% chance of witnessing 200 or more millimetres of rainfall. Probability of seeing 400 millimetres or more of rainfall over the next 5 days is certainly existent here on the north coast. As I said, just on that convergent boundary, just here around Maningrida and up into Warrawai, into that area of the coast and adjacent inland, there is the opportunity to see some very heavy falls in the next 24 to 48 hours. Still the opportunity for some moderate to heavy rain in Darwin, but probably not the heaviest of the rain in Darwin at this stage. Only one computer model is interpreting rapid intensification once the system clears of the North Kimberley coastline. That's the HWRF, the Hurricane Specific Model. It's suggesting a very rapid intensification down to about 950 hectopascals. Look, it does tend to overdo things in the longer term, but we'll keep an eye on it just in case, because there are some signs on various model outputs that whatever's left of that circulation is likely to come back in towards the Pilbara coast in the long term. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep you posted on that as well. And join us for another update tomorrow night. Just remember, if you'd like more comprehensive updates in the morning, we issue very comprehensive updates for all of these systems. AusCycloneChasers.com.au. Click on the subscribe button. You'll be helping us document tropical cyclones, and you'll be getting the very best in tropical cyclone information, analysis, and forecasting. Have a wonderful night. We'll talk to you again tomorrow night. Or I hope to see you as a subscriber tomorrow morning.